I've started the recording, try to figure out the logistics of the video and everything here tonight. So welcome to the Desert Blockchain event for June 2017. And the way let's talk about the intention of the meetup, basically. Part of what we're trying to do here is create a community of people that are knowledgeable, interested, and experimenting and innovating with blockchain. And so this is a little bit larger group than we normally have, but it's kind of customary that we go around the room and introduce ourselves. And I ask that you maybe say your name, what you're up to, and what you're interested in getting out of tonight. So that we can kind of get to know one another. It's amazing what can happen when we start to connect and we start to say, hey, this person knows something about this, and I know something about this, and the next thing you know, we can start to get a community that's really taking ground on this new realm of innovation. So I'm Jay Carpenter, and I'm the founder of Desert Blockchain, and I'm interested primarily in naming, addressing, and numbering, and identity. So I've been in the telecommunications realm for a long time, and I think there's some great opportunity to create some new innovation in communications as well as identity. So I'm going to hold off on you, Scott, because you're presenting tonight. Mark, if you'll introduce yourself.
Good evening, Mark Goldstein. I have a research and consulting practice, International Research Center. I've had that for about 25 years after an engineering career. Mostly deal with broadband IT, some clean tech, some bio for both commercial and government and nonprofit clients. So I'm also on the board and executive committee of the Tech Council. So I've been working on some blockchain legislative initiatives in Arizona. There were two this past year, one to the positive side and one a little odd, the Second Amendment rights thing. But anyway, involved in tech policy in the state ecosystem.
I'm Christian. I've been coming to these for a while now. I was one of the original members of the Bitcoin meetup. I've been involved with cryptocurrency since 2012. I'm just starting to understand how Ethereum works. And that's about it.
Jason, been involved in the cryptocurrency scene since maybe like 2010. Been working with some smart contract developments, as well as some IPFS developments, working on some kind of identity type stuff with Jay and a little bit with Christian here. So just kind of seeing what we can do with the blockchain.
I'm Justin. I'm here as a student to try and learn a little bit about blockchain, and also had a couple ideas about implementing like blockchain technologies into my school. And so I was just hoping to take away some of that.
Thanks, Justin.
My name is Chad, and I'm learning about mining, and I'm also interested in tying assets or items with intrinsic value to the blockchain.
My name is David. I'm a developer working in the area, freelance and for a regular job. I met Jay at one of our other meetups and kind of learned a little bit about blockchain, didn't know a whole lot about it. And so I've come to a few of these and just interested in learning more about
it. My name is Ryan Charleston. I was an early investor in Bitcoin 2012. Got involved in my own startup back in 2013, 2014. Invested in Ethereum last year. Now I'm just kind of looking around for opportunities to put that capital to work in some distributed applications. And yeah, right now I'm just a product manager at a local firm in Scottsdale, and just here to network and meet people.
And I'd like to mention that Ryan and I are talking about creating a day-long event in October. It's going to be blockchain and real estate. And if anybody has an interest in how blockchain can be applied to real estate, please let us know. We'd love to collaborate with you and create an event that's highlights the synergy that we've got here in terms of the real estate industry, plus introduce some of this new technology and innovation, how it might be applied to real estate. So thanks, Ryan, for being willing to work with me on that.
My name's Dave. I'm first timer here. I've been an investor in Bitcoin for 3-4 years now. I've got a bit of technical background, so I've been studying a lot of white papers and learning as much as I can about as many of these altcoins and distributed applications as possible. So it's brings me here.
Yeah, all you people that invested in crypto, may I say that I hate you?
Yes, my name is Bob, and I've been interested in the space for about 30 days. Put some money on Bitcoin and Ether and one other altcoin, and I want to know more about blockchain and its opportunities and knowledge surrounding the space. I feel I'm generally MVP, so a lot to learn, trying to grasp it.
Cool. You're in the right place.
My name is George, and I'm a product marketer, and I started off crowdfunding is kind of how I ended up learning about blockchain and distributed ledger technology, and so crowdfunding for real estate and other forms of such. So I'm really interested in the Ethereum smart contracts, distributed autonomous organizations, and ICOs.
Good evening. I'm Tim Rocco. I've been in payments, financial services for over 20 years. Got involved in Bitcoin in 2013. Should have gotten more involved in Bitcoin in 2013. I day trade right now, and we're looking for projects in the payment space to build.
My name is Jeff Wells. My background is in application software development. Right now I do data science at a startup here in Phoenix, but I'm kind of looking for just my next venture, so, and pretty new to blockchain.
My name is Dylan Figlo. I do marketing for a blockchain-based company called Sweetbridge, which is based here in Phoenix.
Good evening. My name is Boyd. I'm from the same team, Sweetbridge. We're the blockchain startup, and then I'm quite interested in not just the technology part, but also the crypto economics. So which is can bring the new business models. That's why I'm looking forward to see opportunities there.
My name is Jana, and I'm from Sweetbridge as well, and just interested in learning as much as I can about blockchain, cryptocurrency, crypto economics.
Great. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Raul Amavisca. I used to be a software developer. I'm now a consultant for business. I'm very interested in blockchain from the perspective that I know fiat money is going away. I don't know if Bitcoin is going to be the answer, but I know something other than paper money. So and I want to hear what else is
I think I pioneered that fiat money is going away already.
Hi, my name is Sean. I am brand new to digital currency and cryptocurrency, but trying to learn, working on a startup. We're building a community-based marketplace for small business owners, freelancers, to exchange services and goods. And we're building using blockchain and as our underlying technology, and we're interested to see how we can apply cryptocurrency to that as well.
Great.
I'm Persian. I'm here with my dad.
Awesome.
Hi, and I'm Corey Williams, and I just returned from Washington, D.C. presenting a blockchain patent that I have using conflict minerals that are coming out of the Congo and going into our electronics and creating a blockchain supply chain that's clear and concise, so your electronics can be certified conflict-free. So I presented to the caucus in the House of Representatives, and then also a number of nonprofits that are working on conflict minerals around the world.
Corey, would you talk about the blockchain caucus just a little bit, the Arizona involvement in that?
Yeah, so the blockchain caucus is headed by Representative David Schweikert, who's North Phoenix here, and then I apologize, I can't remember the guy's name, but it's Colorado. Representative of Colorado, and they've started a caucus that they want to be able to put companies together and people in blockchain together so they can communicate and maybe create things like white papers and some guidelines. Now, I did bring up, because I'm this way, I brought up that you aren't trying to regulate stuff, are you? And they said no, in no uncertain terms are they trying to regulate anything in the blockchain space. They're just trying to help groups in America that are spot groups. Yeah, and he's laughing, and I did too. But so you got to consider the source. But anyway, right after I left, they had a big meeting about identity on the blockchain, especially for medical purposes, and how you protect identity on the blockchain, especially if you're using it, like your medical records are out there. How do you keep your personal information on? So they had IBM there and a number of other large medical and insurance companies there that they were just brainstorming about things. And then they've got another meeting on July 11th. So they're keeping it moving forward. But because it's David Schweikert, and we're fortunate that he's Arizona, he's very interested in talking to people in our space and finding out what we're doing and maybe creating, which Jay has already started talking about, creating kind of a consortium of people who have blockchain knowledge in the area. We were talking about trying to find space, and he was saying he could help maybe guide us with space and maybe help us get some sort of financial support to get space. So this could be somebody that could really help us move forward in our larger collaboration ideas that we've been talking about.
Yeah, we're fortunate to have that political component to help spark the blockchain distributed ledger technologies here.
Exactly, and they know people. That's the key. Is he can call up the president of IBM and say, "Hey, I need so and so, or I need to ask so and so a question." So we can get through doors that we wouldn't have otherwise already been able to have gotten through ourselves with support from there. So I think it's good that we have a relationship. But all of us are very smart, so we know we'll monitor when things like regulations or something like that starts coming down and becomes more of just writing guidelines.
Thanks, Gordon.
You're welcome.
I'm Mohammed Nauman. I'm an engineering director in American Express, plus part-time I work with a different startup. So I have been learning about blockchain for the last few months, and now I started investing a little bit more into cryptocurrencies. So that's why I'm here to learn more about the cryptocurrencies. Thank you.
All right.
Get someone come in.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Greg Werber. I think I got an email from you. You're Jay Campbell, I believe?
Jay Carpenter.
Jay Carpenter, I'm sorry. My name is Greg Werber. You might recall I RSVP and I sent an email. I can tell you more, but maybe I'll wait because I see a lot of people have that expertise, and I would like to defer to their expertise.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there anybody on the line that would like to unmute and introduce yourself or let us know what you're interested in finding out about tonight? Okay. Very good. Well, let's see, somebody's audio is not working. It is, block this just a little bit. Don't make anybody too busy. I'll adjust this for you. All right, so it's my pleasure to introduce Scott Anecito, who is let's mute that. That's Corey.
Oh, sorry.
All right, so Scott's been attending the Desert Blockchain events on a regular basis this year, and every time he introduces himself, he says that he's a Monero fanatic. So I asked Scott if he would please put together a presentation to introduce us all to Monero, what it's all about, maybe talk about some of the mechanics of transacting in cryptos in general and some other things. So it's my pleasure to turn it over to you, Scott.
Yeah, sure. So as you know, I'm Scott, and I'm going to be presenting Monero, but I'm also going to be covering feedback. Yeah, so as I was saying, I'll be covering Monero and also be covering kind of privacy and security in general, because a lot of people take for granted kind of how they store their cryptocurrency and how that cryptocurrency can kind of be sold from them as well. So even if you don't have an interest in Monero and learning more after this, hopefully you can learn some tips to how to keep your currency safe to some degree. So who am I? Yeah, there we go. All right, so first off, I'm a pretty big privacy and security enthusiast. I wouldn't consider myself an expert per se. I don't have a master's, PhD, but I do like those because they're very practical in day-to-day things. I kind of got my first interest into privacy when I learned about third-party cookies when I was in 5th or 6th grade. And just basically how they record information about you as you visit websites, and sort of this idea of strangers knowing arguably personal things about you and then trying to morph your habits and so forth. And so I kind of went crazy on that and constantly purged my computer cookies, and went so far as whenever I visit my grandparents' house, I'd warn them about the dangers of third-party cookies and purge their computers as well. And that kind of evolved over the years, and I got an interest in computer science and its practicality, and also security. I ended up going to Portland State because of the recognition from the FBI and the NSA on a few things, and got a major or bachelor's in computer science, and did a little bit of capture the flag war game stuff as well. And currently my job is an automation engineer at Intel, so that's basically I just work on and support the web UI applications factory. So how I came to Monero. So usually one of the first questions people ask when you start talking about currency is, how did you come across X altcoin? And so basically towards the end of last year, I had some concerns about the Trump administration and just consumer privacy in general. So I started looking for more privacy-oriented coin and Bitcoin. So I was kind of holding out and hoping that Bitcoin would maybe start implementing some features that would make it a little bit more resilient when it came to privacy. That ended up happening, and so I kind of did a little bit of research and ended up settling on Monero. This is the general framework that I use, and the framework that I'll cover towards the end of the presentation. But basically, what I looked for was the potential for collusion, and how well fingerprints of your transactions were hidden, and then less so how kind of scammy the coin scene. So we'll be covering, like I said, why does privacy matter in general, and we'll be drilling down into cryptocurrency. We'll cover what exactly Monero is and how it covers those fingerprints, a brief history on Monero, and how does it compare against other cryptocurrencies, maybe comparing against Dash and Zcash, and then lastly, we'll do a quick blurb on where you can buy Monero and how to use it. So first, why would you want to care about people wanting your data? People want your data for lots of different reasons. You can kind of argue to how they should be generalized, but probably the most common one that people think of is financial gain. So this could be stealing your actual money that you store in your bank. It could be stealing IP, like season 5 of Orange is the New Black on Netflix and pulling it for ransom. It can be psychological, so some people forge you for the lulz or for harassment. So One example as a gamer that tends to come up is people will call SWAT teams on people who live stream game playing, either because they don't like the person or just, like I said, for the lulz. And then potentially a challenge, they're not in for the money, they don't really care about harassing people, they just like breaking. And the other kind
Okay, hopefully you can, all right, let's resume. Hopefully our internet will stay up. Online will reconnect. Yes. Sorry.
All right. So this is a website, beautiful, and it's data from April of this year of essentially the world's biggest data breaches, and there's a lot of cool ways you can categorize this. You can sort it out by industry and so forth. But kind of the idea behind here is that there's a lot of services which store your information that get breached. So, for example, Anthem is the second largest insurer in the United States. You have eBay, you have JP Morgan Chase, you have Target. The list goes on. But one particular point of interest for me is the really drives it home is the Office of Personnel Management. So in this case, it's employees' social security numbers, job assignments, performance ratings, and training information. But the second breach was even more detailed information. So they got a lot more personal detail about people's security clearances, present and past. And this included a whole bunch of things, from eye color to financial history, to past substance abuse, and not only info about them, but info about their friends and relatives. So kind of the key point and takeaway here is the Office of Personnel Management can't securely store data of people who, if compromised, have serious military and political ramifications. What's the data that these services online? And it's even more of a concern as we increasingly go digital with our lives. And to kind of highlight this and how much a little bit of personal info can do a lot of damage, financially, because it happened at the end of May, but this is an ongoing issue that's caused basically millions of dollars to be stolen from basically Coinbase. And kind of one of the key takeaways is that SMS two-factor authentication is not aid for security. There's a Forbes link below, and I have there's a link to my Facebook page that has all these slides, and you can get it there. But so militia typically can either look for targets or do kind of blanket breaches. And so in this case, this is more of a target attack. And so we're going to be following the story of Cody Brown. And the way Cody Brown's story starts out, and the way he thinks he was originally targeted was, he had a friend whose account was also hacked on Coinbase and was basically asking people to spread the word because he wasn't getting good customer service from Coinbase. And so Cody Brown retweeted it. But kind of key bit of detail here that most likely made Cody Brown target was, he said, I trade all of my coins there. And so we now know that Cody probably does a lot of trading on Coinbase. He probably has a lot of money to be stolen. So the lesson from this slide is don't post personal info in the public. You may think it's harmless, but there's a good chance it'll make you a target. And so from there, he became a target, and this malicious actor, through whatever means, we are not entirely sure how he acquired it or she. He took the simple billing information of Cody Brown. Either it was sold in the dark web, or there's a lot of websites that actually have your information that you have to personally request to have them take it down. There's a variety of means this info could have been taken. The key point is that it's simple billing information. So it's not your social security number. It's not something that potentially has more security around it. And so how this happened was with this simple billing information, through an ultimate authentication method, they were able to basically take the phone number from Verizon and refer to a phone number or phone service that the malicious actor had, and from there they could basically do anything with that phone number. And unfortunately, this happened after fraud business hours with Verizon, so Cody Brown wasn't able to quickly resolve this. And so ultimately what ends up happening is because the malicious actor acquired the phone number through basic billing info, they're able to reset the password on Google, and consequentially with Google take control of the person's Coinbase account.
And two-factor.
Yeah, and two-factor authentication.
Yes.
Yes.
You're supposed to save.
Yeah, you only need 3 pieces of information to port anybody's phone number. And that's an area that I've been active in for a long time, not porting people's phone number maliciously, but in the porting of phone numbers, it's very easy to do. It's like account name, account number, name, and then zip code. And that's it. Some people have a PIN, but most people don't have a PIN. So it's very easy to port somebody's
You had a pin on Verizon, then you set it back. You're out.
Yeah. So
You have the right customer service rep.
Yeah, and the thing is, it isn't just Verizon. This has happened across all the 4 major carriers in the U.S. So unfortunately, there's not really a carrier you can talk to. So we can see how a little bit of personal data can cause sort of a cascading failure, resulting in your money being taken. In this case, cryptocurrency. Incredibly important. You do a lot of things. Probably the 2 biggest things you can do is not store your currency on an exchange where it can be taken, because you don't necessarily actually earn that cryptocurrency. And you can arguably do a lot of things with a little bit of personal data. And so where Monero comes in is it basically hides your financial transactions. There's a lot of reasons why you would want to hide your financial transactions. Reasons people know your income and basically how much savings you have, so that can make you a target. There's a thing called wish lists, which you may or may not be familiar with, which is basically who has the most money and what addresses are stored at. And so if your cryptocurrency doesn't really do anything to mask traceability and linkability, wish lists are possible, and you can consequentially become a target. There's also targeting or advertisements based on transactions. I know you shop somewhere a lot, and then they might target that particular company to get personal data. You could potentially interact with the person of interest. So for example, I might buy a drum kit with Bitcoins from someone over Craigslist. I don't necessarily know what their background is, but they could actually be a drug lord who's actually under investigation. Consequentially, because I've basically exchanged money with them, I'm now also under investigation. for the transaction. So a lot of people think that, people only want to hide their financial information because they commit illegal transactions, but it's really having financial privacy saves you from a lot of headaches. And then lastly, if you're a business, you might not want people to know your vendors, your partners. It also goes into you don't want to know, have your employees know how much they're being paid in comparison to the other employees. But probably the biggest reason that you would want financial privacy in a cryptocurrency is this concept called fungibility. What that means is one coin equals one coin. A cryptocurrency that has these properties of unlinkability and untraceability, it isn't really fungible. And so what do I mean by fungibility? So to understand what fungibility is, we kind of have to first look at what makes up a general transaction. So you can kind of see here, the very top left-hand corner, that's a transaction ID, but we're not too concerned about that. What we're concerned about are basically three components in the transaction itself. So we have the sender and the receiver on the right, and then we also have the amount to the program. And you can see this U right here, because Bitcoin can be traced and people can know when you spend your money. This U means unspent. So we know this person hasn't, at least when I took the screenshot, hasn't spent that money yet. And so a lot of people think that, oh, my wallet address is just a bunch of random numbers and characters. But in fact, you can link those increasingly so over the past couple of years. So one such example that happened recently was there was a white hacker. And what they did was, I'm sure maybe people have heard of WannaCry. Basically, it's ransomware that takes control of your computer, and you have to send bitcoins to a particular address. And if you don't pay the address, you don't get what's on your hard drive. So in this case, there was a client that didn't really follow good, basically IT procedure, and they didn't have any backup of their data. So there was a big push in order to, in the upcoming week, to interact and deal with customers to essentially pay it. And so this white hacker took Bitcoin associated with his wallet and paid the hackers. However, a lot of exchanges have policies that are basically called know your customer. And so they know when you register on these centralized exchanges, a lot of who you are, and because of the traceability properties of Bitcoin, they can tell what addresses are associated with who and who they've paid. So for example, the WannaCry addresses are, everyone knows, in fact, there's probably a decent amount of articles saying, they've only made 10,000 or whatever off of this WannaCry thing. And so similarly, Coinbase is also able to track that paid these ransomware folk, and basically they asked him why, and because he didn't have the proper basically federal credentials to do so, they shut down his account, and then when he tried to create more accounts with his other family's info, they shut down those accounts promptly as well. So you can see, even with arguably legal transactions, you can be shut out of exchanges because your currency is traceable and people can tell what you've done with it and who you are. And this is a situation that's arguably only going to get worse. The FBI recently said they're increasing their budget and they're hiring more people to invest in tech. These two companies out there that are actually their job, or their business, I should say, is encrypt the Bitcoin blockchain. And so then they can basically do all sorts of things and sell that. And so it kind of highlights the need to cover these aspects that make your cryptocurrency traceable or linkable.
If I could interrupt just 1 second while I distract everybody by plugging my cell phone into the here and try to talk at the same time. But today, you might have noticed in the news, there's a big ransomware hack that's happening in Europe, and I believe it's also in Russia and
It's in the US.
in Ukraine.
Deal Piper, there's,
What's that?
it's here too.
It's here too. So, you know, I think we're just on the brink of what this new realm of innovation is bringing upon us, both good and bad. So, anyway, I think the ransomware is
You
just.
ain't seen nothing yet. The industry clock started about a year ago, and the chatter in the industry was within 2 years, you will see the first cataclysmic level cyber attack. So everything that you've seen now, none of those come anywhere near the cataclysmic destination. So we're talking losses well into the billions, if not trillions of dollars. We're talking actual physical damage, death due to system failures. It's coming. Probably.
This is Elio Griafco, by the way. He's a key figure here locally in cybersecurity, and he's active at the Arizona Cybersecurity Warfare Range. And you're catching him actually at one of his cheery days.
All right, so we're going to be covering how these 4 components, so I mentioned 3 before, so the sender will be using the name Alice, mount, and the receiver, and as well as the network. So your IP address isn't recorded on the blockchain, but other nodes in the network can associate your transaction with your IP. So one of the first things you do when you want to actually use Monero is you create a wallet. And unlike a lot of other wallets, this Monero wallet consists of 4 keys. So 2 public keys and 2 private keys. And each key set has a view key and a spend key. And so what you do to mask the receiver is, so Bob here on the right, Alice wants to send some money to Bob. So she takes Bob's 2 public keys, throws on basically a random hash, and creates what's known as a stealth address, which is sometimes called a one-time public key. And so Bob then, to access this money with his 2 private keys, creates a one-time private key. And so what this basically results in is, so in other cryptocurrencies, you might have no stealth addresses. And so if Alice wants to send money to Bob, she sends it to this one general address. And then if Dave also wants to send money to Bob, they also send it to. So basically, we can link these 2 transactions together. And with stealth addresses, because we create one-time addresses, no 2 transactions can be linked together. So for example, if we're an outside viewer, we don't know if these particular 2 transactions are going to the same person or to different people. And so the next thing we protect with Monero is the sender with ring signatures. How ring signatures work is you can kind of think of this as a series, or the ledger as a series of transactions. And so from these series of transactions, we select basically a transaction that we control. So someone has used a transaction to give us money, and we select a certain number of transactions from the ledger that we don't control. And so what we do with those is we create what's called a ring signature. And so a ring signature in Monero has to be of at least size 3, so it isn't 4, so it's not a optional security measure. And so how it works is, as you can see here in white, this is just basically a transaction output that you control mixed with selected with 4 other transactions. Important thing to realize is that as an outside viewer, we don't actually know which output I actually control. And so what this basically looks like on the ledger is because I'm selecting transactions I don't control, it looks like they may or may not be being spent. So I can actually tell when money is being spent because I'm using multiple inputs, and these multiple inputs over time, you can't see it far away, but there's little blips that basically show when a particular transaction was used in a ring signature. So over time, a transaction can be used multiple times, say 10, and you can't tell which of those 10 it was actually spent. And so how we make sure that there's no double spend and that you don't spend money other people control is what is called a key image. And so you can kind of think of this as a cryptographic hash that basically makes sure you own the transaction you're spending. And so again, we don't know what transaction is actually being spent. And it's also important to note that the key image is only built off of your transaction. So you don't put a key image if you select a different 4 transactions. It's always going to be the same to prevent you from double spending. And so how we protect the amount that you're spending is through a thing called ring confidential transactions, which is we basically took this idea called confidential transactions from what's known as the Elements project, and we modified it for ring signatures. And the way it works is it basically uses what's known as a Pedersen commitment, and kind of the layman's way of describing it is instead of spending an amount, you spend a commitment. And because of the cryptographic properties of this commitment, you can still verify that it's valid and do all sorts of other things. And ring confidential transactions isn't required right now, but it is the default. So you don't have to worry about trying to find some setting in your UI to turn it on. And as a result, it has almost 100% usage. Roughly within the past 20 days, looking at the ledger, only 35 transactions out of 7,000 transactions have opted not to use confidential transactions. We masked with Monero cryptography is, or I should say, we're going to, is with a project that's being worked on called Covery. And what Covery does is pass a transaction out to the network, to all the other nodes. The nodes joining you see that the transaction is coming from this other node. Now, they don't necessarily know if that transaction came from you or if it came from 2 nodes earlier in the broadcast. But malicious nodes may log it, and with enough malicious nodes, they might be able to determine that IP address is likely associated with that transaction, even though they don't necessarily know who it's going to and what is being spent. So how we're planning on protecting against that is with the Covery, it uses a basically network that sits on top of the ClearNet, so the internet everyone uses. If people are familiar with Tor at all, it's basically something similar to Tor, but it's more geared towards services running on I2P rather than Tor, which is more so geared towards HTTP.
Is this run on I2P or Tor, or is it its own thing?
So Covery is an I2P router. Okay. So basically, what you're doing is you have your node that you broadcast through I2P, and what you get is, all right, grab the inside. But it basically gives you a I2P address that no one can really link to. And so in this way, your IP is protected from potentially ever being associated with whatever transaction you're broadcasting out. And so that isn't something that is currently implemented in Monero, but it's a project that's being worked on. But you can hide your IP address by using Tor and routing your traffic through Tor, or by using a VPN of your choice. But keep in mind that VPNs can also potentially log, so that you are theoretically trusting someone rather than I2P, which is basically a trustless protocol. And so how Monero kind of started out was there's cryptocurrency that came onto the Bitcoin platforms in March 2014 called Litecoin. And shortly after Bitcoin came out, there was a lot of what seemed to be kind of questionable things. Basically, already 80% of the coins had been mined, and it looked like the ledger had been kind of fudged and falsified, and so someone was potentially trying to profit off of it. But it had some interesting things. Mainly, it was built on CryptoNote. And as a result of kind of these questionable, shady things with Litecoin, a group of people went off and forked it in April, and they named the cryptocurrency Monero. And shortly thereafter, there were some leadership issues with a guy named Thankful for Today. And basically, he wanted to do a lot of things like merge mining with Litecoin, set the default option to voting when you to vote to yes instead of abstain. So this caused a lot of people to kind of question Thankful for Today, so they basically revoked his access, and a group of people took over and they kind of renamed the coin Monero. And then come September 2014, there was a spam attack. So there was a bug at one point where if you built up the block size large enough, it would cause a network fork. And so what happened was this malicious actor spam transactions, because Monero has what's known as a dynamic block size, unlike Bitcoin, which has a locked 1 megabyte block size. And so this arguably gives Monero a lot more scalability than Bitcoin because it's dynamic. And because of that, these spam transactions over time increased it to the point where it hit this memory-triggered bug that caused a network fork. But the network was able to recover shortly after, and the bug was patched. However, what this caused was a lot of people to kind of drill down to the nitty-gritty of the code because they had forked a project basically they didn't understand. There wasn't a whole lot of comments. So what you see kind of over the next year, from 2015, there isn't a whole lot of activity in terms of releases. The 3 white papers were released, and the code is refactored, commented, and developers gain more of an acute understanding of the protocol and cryptography behind Monero. And so in 2016, there's more of a shift back to the UX side of things, so developing a UI and that sort of thing, which brings us to kind of 2017, or at the beginning of this year, ring confidential transactions, which hides the amount you're spending, was put on the mainnet. It isn't enforced yet, but there will be a hard fork in September that makes it mandatory. So all transactions, whether you want it or not, will have their amount maxed. And so now that we've covered kind of the basics of how Monero hides your fingerprints, how does it compare to a lot of other, or 2 other cryptocurrencies that kind of market themselves as being privacy-oriented? So kind of going down the first column, we have Dash. And so what Dash has is what's known as private send. It has 2 other transaction types, normal send and instant send. We're not going to cover them because we're focused on privacy. But what private send does, and what I've highlighted in red as kind of a big point of concern, is known as a master node. And so what master nodes do is they try to make the transactions private by taking a series of inputs, and so you and perhaps 7 other people who want to mix your coins and basically tumbling them up and then throwing them out at the desired output addresses. But the problem with master nodes is that they can log your inputs and they can log the outputs. So if someone compromises whoever owns the master node or whoever hosts the master node, so like a server hosting service instead of hosting it out of your house, they can potentially force the master node to collude and de-anonymize your transactions. And similar to Monero, Zcash, there's no protocol built in to hide your IP, but again, it's not necessarily a huge point of concern if you're smart enough to either use a VPN or direct your traffic over Tor to mitigate that. And as a result, yeah.
if I could interrupt you for a moment, Scott. For those of you that might not be familiar with Dash, they're actually primarily located here in the Valley. They have an office at what, SkySong?
SkySong,
yeah. And so there's another cryptocurrency that's also active and primarily based here in the Valley called Nexus, which is on Mill Avenue. But for those of you that are kind of new to this realm, Dash is something that's, what, 2-3 years old? And currently has a market capitalization of about $600-700 million. So the interest and what's taking place in this whole realm is something like I've never seen before. And I was a very successful stockbroker for about 10 years. I have never seen anything like this. So I'm pointing that out because you're going to be talking that it's a U.S. company, and it's kind of one of our basic.
Yeah. So the primary governance is national also have ability to vote on proposals. And they can also drive the protocol, but it's also a U.S.-based company, and basically that kind of combination of being more of a company-driven cryptocurrency. If you're concerned about collusion, as a company, they're more able to be kind of force-polluted by being handed a national security letter and so forth, more so than an actual, genuine, free, liberated, open-source software project that doesn't have a company behind it. There's some other issues, namely Instamine, where roughly 1.5 million coins were mined in the first 8 hours. And the way master nodes work is you have to have 1,000 coin collateral. And this basically kind of potentially concentrates the people who were a very select few in those first 8 hours mining to own a large sum of coins and then produce master nodes, which the fewer people that own, the easier it is to basically do non-monetary transactions. And there's kind of in terms of game theory, because lock up the liquidity in a cryptocurrency because you stake 1,000 coins. You also kind of make coins because you provide a service using private send. But locking up those coins, basically, you're locking up the supply, which further increases the price. So right now, Dash is like 160, I think, give or take. So right now, it costs roughly $1,000 just to make one master node. So a lot of people, like the average Joe, is not going to be able to afford to buy master nodes. People who have master nodes are probably likely going to keep them, and if they don't keep them, if they basically take a master node off, there's still not going to be a huge probability that more people are going to pick that up and be able to actually have enough to stake a master node. And there's some proposals to have a partial ownership of master node, but again, that's not implemented. There are arguably issues with that. There's kind of some basic statistics about Dash. It has a block times, and originally the coin cap after it was originally released was 84 million, and now they've lowered it to 18.9 million coins, which is again more concerned because it's now used to lock up coins, and kind of further issue of master nodes. So it's Monero, as we covered. It hides the sender.
Could I interrupt you one more time, Scott? Having been a securities broker in the United States and dealing with all the regulatory regime, I can tell you that what's going on in the cryptocurrencies in many instances is like 180 degrees counter the legacy regulatory realm would allow. So in addition to the cybersecurity, the phenomenal value that's expanding and contracting here, we are in the brink of a conversation that is challenging some of the fundamental tenets of our legacy regulation and governance.
No worries. So Monero, as we covered, it hides the sender with stealth addresses, it hides the receiver with ring signatures, and it hides the amount that you send with ring CT, and all of those are trustless-based protocols. So you don't have to trust anyone to basically not de-anonymize your transactions. Again, you don't hide your IP currently. It's something that's being actively pursued, but there are ways to mitigate that. As I said before, Tor, VPNs. And because it's enforced, it's not optional, so you will always, all transactions are ring transactions. And as I highlighted before, almost 100% of transactions are ring confidential transactions as well. And as a result of this, it's a purely trustless protocol. Primary governance is basically contributors who contribute code around the world. There's no free mine, there's no insta-mine to worry about, and as a miner, basically 45, 10%, or 20% of your block reward being given to someone else. The block time is about 2 minutes, so you can expect the confirmation time for a Monero transaction around 3 minutes, give or take, and we have a similar coin path around 18.4 million. What's probably what's interesting with Monero is it has a tail emission, so after all these roughly 18 million coins have been mined, basically every block there's a 0.6 Monero emission, which amounts to about 0.3 per minute. And what this does, it does a lot of things. Probably one of the things that people might, I guess, associate with, like Bitcoin. A lot of people have lost Bitcoin over the years. I've heard stories about, like, say, the editor of Gizmodo, I think, had millions in Bitcoin on a hard drive that threw out. And so a lot of cryptocurrency has been taken out of circulation. And so what this does is it kind of provides an anchor for Monero. And there's a lot of other economics in terms of incentivizing miners to keep mining and so forth, but we won't go into those too much. And then lastly is Zcash. So Zcash has two kinds of transaction types. One is Z-address transactions, the other is T-address transactions. And the way Z-address transactions work, they use what's known as a zero-knowledge proof, which is an interesting concept, and so forth seems to do a good job of basically hiding all three components that Monero also hides, but they hide it absolutely in theory. But however, it's relatively new cryptography, so if you're concerned about, say, peer review or that sort of thing of the cryptography behind the cryptocurrency, there's a little bit of concern there. And only roughly 25% of the transactions use the address transactions. And this is, if you factor for mining, some people like Greg Maxwell have speculated that it's actually closer to 5% of people who use the address transactions. And so kind of the idea here is, if you have a privacy cryptocurrency, generally, and you care about it, generally you probably want to make it the default or enforce it. That doesn't seem to be the case with Zcash, unfortunately. And Zcash has an issue which is known as kind of crypto waste. So in the genesis of Zcash, they had basically what's known as public parameters to kind of kick off the coin. And so public parameters, it requires basically 6 private keys being generated. And so what they had was 6 actors basically create these 6 keys. The problem is you're trusting these 6 people to properly dispose of the private keys, and you're also trusting the setup of how the public parameters were set up. So you're kind of trusting, and there's no real accurate way of proving that there wasn't collusion of some sort. And the issue here is if someone has those 6 private keys, or if kind of setup had some sort of collusion of some sort, it enables people to print unlimited money. And this is potentially more of a point of concern when its primary governance is a US-based company. And so, I mean, I encourage you to do your own research. but it's not ultimately a trustless cryptocurrency. It has no pre-mine or insta-mine, but like I said, there's an issue with the genesis of Zcash in terms of how coins are created. And then lastly, there's a block reward fee. So roughly for the next 3.5 years, give or take, 20% of the block reward if your miner is given to the investors of Zcash. It has a similar block time and roughly a similar coin count. So there are some issues with Monero. One of the biggest ones is scalability. So an average transaction in Monero is about 13 kilobytes. And this is roughly 43 times the amount of Bitcoin transaction, which is about 0.3 kilobytes. There are ways to potentially mitigate this, namely with reducing the range proof size. We can bring that down potentially to 7 kilobytes, and there's a lot of other optimizations because the size is largely driven by RINCT, and as being somewhat of a new protocol within Monero, there's theoretically a lot of ways to optimize it and bring down the transaction size and make Monero transactions more scalable. The other probability that tends to get brought up is the issue of probability. So with ring signatures, the average or the default ring size is 5, so us plus 4 other transactions we use as Pantone transactions. Problem is they're not all equal 20% probability because of people's spending habits. People tend to spend money closer to when they actually receive it rather than, say, waiting a year and then spending it. And so basically, newer transactions are more likely to be the actual transaction. This isn't necessarily, doesn't break your anonymity per se, but it's not, because it's not 100%. But it is something that's being worked on, and the Monero community has been aware of it for a couple of years, and it's just a really hard problem to work on because you're dealing with how people spend money and probability and so forth. And so lastly, in terms of roadmap, there's a lot of things being worked on across the community. Multi-signature, so basically you have a wallet and you require 2 out of 3 people to sign the transaction in order for the money to go out from the wallet. So for example, if you have a family, you might have a wallet that's owned by 2 parents and a kid. And the kid wants to spend something, so they spend their private key, and then they have to get a parent approval of one of the parents to then sign to have the money go out to wherever. Similarly, there is an unofficial Tails image. Tails is a privacy-oriented operating system, and so we have Monero supported on unofficial image. We're currently working on getting it into the official image. If you're into hardware wallets, you may have heard of Ledger, which has a couple of hardware wallets. Probably the most popular one is the Monero S. And currently, there's a draft to get Monero included into a hardware wallet. Because currently, one of the other issues is Monero doesn't really have a hardware wallet, and if you're concerned about privacy and security, you might want to actually use a hardware wallet. But unfortunately, that isn't an option right now. Worked on. And then also mobile wallets. So Monero doesn't really have a mobile wallet yet. That's also being worked on. There's an unofficial alpha build. Currently was published, I think, within the past week. And also light wallet. So basically, you don't need to have stores a full ledger on your device. You can basically easily, without having to have a really powerful phone, use Monero transactions. And lastly, Fluffy Box, which is this idea of reducing kind of network congestion by roughly half. So when you broadcast a transaction out to the network, it gets broadcast out to effectively the whole network. And so that's bandwidth taken up, and then when a block gets mined, that block gets sent out to the network again. So you're effectively sending out a transaction twice. And so what this does is rather than send out a block with a transaction again, it sends out a block with an index. So it cuts down bandwidth in half, thus also kind of reducing the issue of scalability for Monero. Maybe, not sure. And then lastly, as I said before, there's a hard fork coming in September, and so running confidential transactions will no longer be optional, they will be enforced. And so you will have enforced unlinkability and scalability, and the ring size, minimum ring size is currently set to 3. So if you do 2 other phony transactions, that's going to be increased to at least 4. There's discussions to increase it potentially higher. And so if you want to buy Monero, there's a guide here. You can search on your search engine choice from like Monero Eric, how to buy Monero. And this is pulled from his data from 2016 for about $100 worth of Monero. And it sounds like a lot of people here have bought cryptocurrency in one way or another. But arguably one of the best ways and cheapest ways, one of the more common ways that people tend to buy Monero in the community is they use an exchange owned by Coinbase called GDAX. And so you essentially transfer in your fiat through, say, ACH. And then from there, you buy Bitcoin, and then from there you take it to Poloniex, which all you need for Poloniex is an email because they only trade in cryptocurrency, not fiat, so they aren't subject to as much familiar customer regulation. Basically, if you go through Poloniex, you get about 2.5% in fees for $100 worth. Shapeshift, some people may have heard of Shapeshift. It allows you to basically transform your currency into any other cryptocurrency. And so if you go there, they have higher exchange rates, so it's about 7%. So if you really care about money, you might want to go through Poloniex. There are exchanges out there that do fiat to Monero transactions. The one that you probably tend to use the most is called Kraken. And it's about $10. They charge $10 for wire transfer, and then however much your bank charges for a wire transfer, and then 0.26% for however much you're transacting. And then lastly, you can also buy Bitcoin on basically the only decentralized cryptocurrency exchange. They were formerly called BitSquare, and now they're kind of rebranded and calling BISC. But basically, because it's decentralized, you don't have to give away your social security number and a lot of other personal info to decentralized exchanges. And they don't, because of how it's implemented over Tor, and they don't hold your cryptocurrency. So if you care about kind of security and privacy, you might opt to buy Bitcoin over BISC, and then go to your chosen exchange, whether that's Shapeshift or Poloniex or some other exchange, and then convert it from there. And so now you have Monero and you want to spend it. You can either spend it through Shapeshift again, but probably the cheapest and best way to do it is through a website called xmr.to. And what it does is it's pretty simple. You enter in the Bitcoin address you send Bitcoins to, the amount. It gives you how much money you need to send them in Monero and what address to send it to, and then it gets sent relatively quickly. I think for most of the transactions I've done, it's, I want to say roughly within 10 minutes, I'll have a confirmed Bitcoin purchase. So what this basically means is anywhere you can buy stuff with Bitcoin, you can buy it with Monero. So you aren't limited to vendors that only support Monero, which there aren't really because we don't have any third-party plugins like BitPay, but that's also a thing the community is being worked on. Right now it's called Paybe, I think, and it's usually renamed Globy. But that's that. And so there's a couple of things that we have. The official website is getmonero.org. There's a variety of Reddit communities. The main one's Monero. If you want to mine Monero, we have Monero mining. If you're interested in trading, and in general, news concerning other cryptocurrencies and Monero, XMR Trader is pretty good. And then there's Monero Community if you're interested in investing your time or energies into making the community a better place. We also have a Stack Exchange, so if you have a question, more than likely someone's asked it on the Stack Exchange, you can get an answer. We also have an IRC series of channels. The main one you probably want to connect to is Pound Monero on Freenet. If you have any questions or want to AC contact me. I have an IRC handle, XMR Scott, and that's also my Reddit handle as well. That pretty much concludes my presentation. So yeah.
Are you one of the core developers, or
no, not at all. So
contributing your code?
I should clarify. I guess I own Monero, but I mainly use it for its utility value. I don't really believe in speculating much. You're more likely to get actual value using the utility value and get that value instantly, doing effectively anonymous transactions. That's all I'm Bitcoin. We answer people's questions on Reddit when I can, and generally give feedback suggestions to the various code projects that are ongoing. So I'm not a core contributor. Ideally, I'd like to work on the UI at some point.
Any other questions for Scott?
Scott, you mentioned that you say there was or was not a Monero mobile wallet.
So right now it's under active development, so there isn't an official alpha release per se. If you want me to, I can probably link you the request that has a release. So there's people who have it out in the wild running on like a 1.2 and so forth, but it isn't officially released. So if you want to, you can try using it, but there's probably going to be obviously a lot of UX issues. It's going to be a little bit slow because it isn't actually optimized efficiently.
Is that more on the Android side?
Yeah, that's on the Android.
Because iOS has a Monero wallet.
Yeah.
On the iOS side, but not on the Android side?
Yeah, there are wallets that claim they're Monero wallets. I know there's been a lot of issues with wallet called free wallets, so I recommend staying away from free wallet. It's kind of a scam. But yeah, so right now, the Android wallet is it's not very optimized. I think one of the commanders basically said it's semi-polished JavaScript on some code. The iOS is native, and I don't know how close it is to release. But yeah, so both OSs are being worked on, both iOS and Android.
Another question for you before you go on. What do you think about Cloak Coin as another anonymous coin as well? Cloak, C-L-O-A-K.
I don't know what the protocol is for that, so I can't say. I know, I mean, maybe you can tell me, but I think.
No, I was going to ask your expertise on it.
No, I know there's a lot of coins that I looked at, like Verge Coin, Coin, but basically all they do is they hide your IP address of the network. So you're still going to have the same traceability and linkability issues with your addresses, because it doesn't actually match the receiver or the sender or their master sending. So again, there's a whole lot of issues there. So I suspect it's probably the same thing, but I can't say for sure. So yeah.
Most of the cryptographic utilities pull from crypto in the past, or these all innovations. I know RingCT is new.
Yes. Yeah. So there are. So yeah. So ring signatures were in CryptoNote. There were some optimizations made off the top of my head. Can't say what they were. I think it's mainly to do with. Basically double, well, not double, but yeah, there's some white papers on it that basically explain we have 5 out now, so I would suggest checking those.
Is the same goes to the crypto that goes outside of RingCT is 4 or 5 years old?
Yeah, so like ring signatures themselves is there was an academic paper published in like 2001 or so, and then traceable ring signatures, I think. Like they published in 2007. So it's crypto that's been around for a while.
Was Monero essentially the same kind of bug exploits that like Bitcoin was with the whole like ETSA?
Those recent exploits, they're kind of the ones we made.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from what I understand, it was actually Monero coder that discovered that, and so we, Fluffy Pony, kind of the maintainer of the project, he consulted with a few other people once they found it how to properly like disclose it to the other people that are forks of Bitcoin. And so some of them basically implemented the fix, others didn't. I think Bitcoin is one of the ones that didn't. But yeah, so Monero.
Did they do some kind of analysis if they were subject to any of the?
Yeah, there was an analysis done with different key images. You can kind of audit basically points and see if people actually try to manipulate in some fashion, but nothing.
Good presentation, Scott. I've actually learned some new things about Monero, so thanks. One thing I didn't hear you mention though that maybe you have some thoughts on is ZK snarks and how that is being planned implementation into Ethereum, possibly other coins as a way to make transactions anonymous. Are you familiar with that at all?
Yeah, so I haven't called it out by name explicitly, but yes, ZK snarks is an optimization of the snarks protocol. It's arguably relatively in crypto, and so it's arguably less secure and hasn't been as vetted. But it's not to say, I kind of people think zero knowledge proofs is probably the way forward if we can get past the whole crypto waste bit and actually have it be trustless. So the issue for me, so you don't have the issue of people kind of looting your anonymity set by doing public transactions.
So I'm curious, you mentioned some of the threats against and how it defends against them. What's your threat model, what threat actor? Are you assuming a malicious, just an individual, a malicious, like a cyber crime kind of organization, or like a state level actor? Where on that?
Like in my evaluation?
In your talk, yeah.
So basically, maybe conclusion and avoiding the protocol. So like master nodes, people that can be compromised in such a way, you're trusting them that they won't give away the mix and the tumbler data for the inputs and the outputs. So their anonymity can basically be compromised.
So I guess to make it a little more concrete, you mentioned the probability is not being even 20% across all parties in a ring transaction, because of the probability of people spending money close when they receive it.
Yeah.
But the easier thing for a larger state level actor, even not quite at that scale, is just correlate with shipping. Like the reason you're spending money is generally not just to move it, unless it's money laundering, like you're security of networking. This is, I mean, we've gone through some very technical material tonight, but this is just the brink of a whole new realm of innovation that we really don't know where it's going to lead to. And I want to acknowledge everybody that's here tonight that has an interest in this and is part of the Phoenix community to come together and see what we can create. because there's a lot, there are some things that are going sideways, but there's a lot that's and can go right. So.
Could you elaborate on things that are going sideways? Coin offerings, and a lot of them are attached to the Ethereum platform. And this is the first time it's happened, but I don't think people lost money. People lost their money with those who lost their money with those who had lost margin trades. So that's outside of that.
That's the much more interesting part. Is if you look at traditional flash crashes, as we've automated microfinance, like trading at incredibly high-speed trading. There were already crashes in the stock market where one person moves a little too much, it goes outside the threshold, and then it triggers this cascade effect. And by basically the whole way Ethereum is constructed, by being able to build that in, and like that's a core feature that's why I use Ethereum, the level of interconnectedness, the amount of things that something like that can spread to, it's like a whole other order of magnitude how much of the economy could crash for one series of little things. So I find that fascinating. We're tying things together, and instead of resiliency, we're making for, depending on the scale of adoption, an extremely fragile global economy, where one little thing in one coin can potentially cascade and wipe out tremendous amounts of debt and cause tremendous amounts of chaos, some of which may be able to be undone, some of which may lead to real-world problems. So here's a fun scenario. Let's say this.
Well, before we get into scenarios. Thank everybody for coming. Next month, we don't have a speaker topic for the monthly session, which will be on July 26th. And I'm not sure if it'll be here. We haven't scheduled this room yet. But on the 29th, we'll have a day-long session in this room with IBM presenting the Hyperledger project, which, if you're not familiar with Hyperledger, it's a consortium of 100 plus companies, some of the biggest companies in the world that are getting together, and they're looking at how can this new technology be applied to many different use cases. So I'll be sending out some information on that. There's already a lot of people that have signed up for that. So if you have things that you'd like to cover, or you know people that would like to hear talk, and they could be either here locally or virtually, please let me know, and we can work on the talk. I would like to give another shot. That's it for tonight, and,
Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Jay. If there's anyone here who's interested in investment information in regards to the ICOs and everything else, I'm a cryptocurrency coach. My name is Terrence, aka Master T, I'm a martial arts master. So feel free to keep my information before you leave.